Welcome to a happy Friday and to another episode of Stoke Meter. And we have a fantastic guest. Look at this. Look at his background back there. Brad Luttrell. Brad Luttrell is an Uber man. That's what I'm going to call him. Not the driving kind, but he's a CEO and co-founder of GoWild. And GoWild is a free social community that helps outdoor enthusiasts improve their skills, find better gear, and earn rewards. I read that exactly. Didn't that sound pretty good?
Sounded great.
Like you nailed it, man. It's like perfect.
And what I love about Brad is quite frankly, this is the first time we've ever seen each other on camera or anything else like this. But being an outdoor enthusiast myself, and I'm surrounded by outdoor enthusiasts here in Idaho. And then, of course, Gary is a monstrous outdoor enthusiast as well. It's really cool to have this app that you get to see. Like back in the day, I had outdoor life, right? And now I have it everywhere I go. So you got to tell us, man, how in the world did this all start? And give us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I'll do the second half of that question first because it kind of leads up to the first part. So I'm from southeastern Kentucky, grew up in Appalachia. The outdoors is just ingrained in you, right? It's and you know, I'm just old enough to where when I was really young, I didn't have the internet, and video gaming meant like Nintendo, right? It wasn't World of Warcraft for 18 hours a day. So we played outside a bunch. You know, I hunted a little bit, fished a lot, and off-roading and hiking and camping was a big part of my life. And so I grew up with all that, and you know, went off to college, did the journalism thing for a while, graduated right in the middle of the or right at the beginning of the Great Recession. Journalism didn't pan out too well. We've all seen how that played out over the last 13, 14 years. So I got into advertising, and you know, I always had the entrepreneur bug. I've had a run at starting other companies in the past that didn't shake out very well, or I had one that I shut down to start in advertising, and so I always had this drive. Well, the first company agency I started working with, I met a guy. We liked each other, and we had a business idea together, and we started. It's a long story, but we started working on it on the side. And he got laid off. They found the operating agreement and they fired me.
What?
Starting a side hustle.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. You got to be kidding me.
No, man. So they were like, hey, tell us about this company. And I tell them, and they said, why didn't you tell us about it? I said, because you would have fired me. And they're like, that's silly. And then they fired me 3 days later.
Welcome to corporate America.
Right, exactly. So I went on to another agency, and I worked there for 5 years. But when I showed up, at that first day, I said, I am going to start another company or a company, and I just got fired for this. So I want to know that you guys are cool with it. And they said, yep, whenever that happens, we'll support you. And they did. So I started after college, really, as a lot of people do, as a lot of people I've talked to do, they have gotten into their roots, whatever it is. Like hunting made me feel like I was at home. It reminded me of being a kid. It reminded me of my dad teaching me to shoot or fish. And part of me just wanted to get back to that. But part of me also, like, you know, as my kids grow up, I want to teach my kid to fish and stuff. So I started getting really into whitetail hunting, though, which is hard. Like people think that's like fat dude in a tree stand with a beer and like, you might see a deer like that, but to shoot a buck, like, it's very hard. They have incredible sight, they have incredible hearing, they can smell like hundreds of times better than you. Yep. Like we smell Italian food, and they can smell oregano, they can smell the black pepper, right? Like it's that level of better. Whereas we're like, ooh, dinner, right? They are just incredible animals. And I was hunting with a guy, and I thought I was doing well. Well, when I couldn't hunt with him anymore, I was like, man, I really suck at this. I hunted 2 years and got skunked. And I was like, this is crazy, because I was reading online, I'm buying magazines, but you know, you end up in forums
Right.
and at that time especially, and I don't even mean Reddit. I mean, I'm in like Angel Fire era web forums, right? That's what they
Yeah.
look like. And I'm like, this is insane. This is 2016 and I can't find an online community to connect with people who are like me, who are trying to get better or can help me in my area. You know, I'd end up reading a forum for an hour or 20 minutes or whatever it was. And I'm like, they're talking about blacktail or in
Yeah.
Texas. Like, we don't have cactus in Kentucky. This is irrelevant. So really just through frustration and like the first realization of the business opportunity to create a place where I could go and get advice. And the second part of that realization was that, you know, if you can remember back to 2016, it's the Trump-Hillary election.
Yep.
Social media was super nasty. At that time, I was like, it can't get much worse than this, but 2020 would prove us wrong, right? But the 2020 was like a hold my beer moment for social media. You know, it's like, oh, it can get much worse. But 2016 at the time, I'm like, this is terrible. Like, I want to get a place where I can post and talk about this stuff without getting trolled by vegan coworkers, right? And no insult. Like, if you're vegan, that's cool. But like, a lot of the times I've had like when I was on Facebook, I've been off of there for 3 or 4 years now. You share something and you have people who are giving you grief about it.
Yeah.
And you know, Instagram's the same way. I deleted my Instagram. I don't even remember. Maybe it might have been last year. I don't remember. But those platforms are just rife with that stuff. So
Yeah.
I told you I was going to give long answers when we started this.
Is
I've
great.
already done it. I've already stood up to my word on doing so. But essentially, this long journey that I you know, kind of pulled me into something that I wanted to do, and I had been trying to figure out for really 2 years before I did it, of what I wanted to do, because I knew I wanted to start something, and I was. You know, I looked at everything, dude. I mean, at one point, I'm like, maybe I'll do multi-tiered marketing for beard oil. Like, I had all these crazy ideas of what, like, why hasn't anybody done that? And it's like, well, that's a really bad idea, because I don't see dudes hosting like parties for beard oil, right? Like, I had all these crazy ideas though of what I wanted to do. And I bought like all these weird URLs for all these companies I might start. I've been trying to like offload the dozens of URLs I've bought over the years. But that's how I ended up in it, man. And it just went from like, oh, that's it. Like, that's what I should do. I was standing in a field in southeastern Kentucky, scouting for whitetail in August. And by December, I had 4 co-founders and we were running full speed at it.
That is absolutely fantastic. And reading about your history, there was one quote that you said that you mentioned it in part is after you were fired that one time, you said, I was free to become whatever I wanted. Yeah. Instead of going down in the doldrums and going, oh, this sucks, I need to go find another job. You really, that epiphany hit you right there. And
I jumped straight past grief and went to anger for a while. Like, I was mad for a long time about it. Partially because I was already trying to get out. I had just, the company had changed a lot. And it was one of those things, man, like I'm sitting there at 4:50 waiting on 5 o'clock because I hated it. And it got to that point. So I was mad though, because I wanted to go on my terms and I didn't feel good about how it ended. And I was immature, you know, I was a different person back then. And I mean, it's funny now because, you know, I feel like I'm still, I keep feeling like I'm young, although I keep realizing like I have memories of my dad now. And I'm like, oh, he was younger than I am now at that.
Totally. And, you know, and that's why they have that great resignation, right? People are making those same realizations that you did back in the day.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yep. But yeah, I did. It was years later when I did finally really like, initially I was like, oh my God, I got this great company. This worked out okay. But I was still mad for years. But then, you know, when I was able to look back at what's happened out of that, I mean, I was thrown into an agency that was really small and gritty and kind of like a startup. And, you know, we worked on a lot of small accounts. We got fired all the time because we were screwing stuff up. But the cool thing about that was that we were constantly churning accounts, and I'm getting to work on a bourbon account, an ice cream account. And like, you're just like, but whereas before I had 5 accounts and that was it, right? Like I worked on 5 accounts for 2 years. And I think when I left that company, as I was creative director, and I think I had 25 accounts under me that I was working on. and my team was managing all of the agencies, like between 10 of us or so. So it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
How long did you stay with that company before you cut bait and did your own
5
thing?
years.
5 years. So
Yeah.
really kind of the trajectory was about 5 years then.
Yeah, it took. I spent 7 years in advertising, 2 at the first company before they fired me, and then 5 years. And now I spent probably 18 months of that. The end of that was openly working on GoWild.
Yeah.
And they were cool with it as long as it didn't affect office hours. So, it got at the end. It was getting a little hard to keep things separated.
Oh, yeah.
We were live. We had an app in the app store, and I was still working at an agency, and they all knew it was coming. It was more of like a win.
Yeah.
And just so randomly, man, I told you we get fired all the time. Well, this client I ran into at Kroger who fired us, he liked me, but he didn't like our agency. He was like, "Hey, when are you leaving?" And I said, "Well, we've raised a little bit of money, but I don't have enough to quit. I'm still trying to figure it all out." And he offered me a 6-month gig making really good money for part-time work to come, like, basically he paid me to come start their marketing department. They didn't have one. And so that was a godsend,
Yeah.
So I was able to quit, have some security, but keep my salary mostly off of GoWild.
Yeah.
And it worked out really well. I mean, it was very serendipitous.
Very much so. How did you even get the GoWild name? Because I'd imagine that would have been hard to find, first of all, even hard to acquire. But how did it all come about?
Well, I still don't know the URL because the company that owns it wants like 150 grand for it, and I'm not paying that. But it's kind of funny because we don't really live in a world where URLs matter as much anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it still would be nice to own, but I'm just not paying that kind of money for it.
Yeah.
But the name itself, we actually do have trademarked. Honestly, that was my expertise, and that was like, it's kind of stupid now when I look back at it, but like that was the first thing I figured out. I was like, well, what would I call it? And I had a list, and I went back just recently because it was fun. I don't know why I thought about it with that question you just asked.
Yeah.
And I was like, what were all the really bad names I thought of before? and there was about 30 of them, but that's what I used to do in advertising, was name companies, and we'd do branding. And so, you kind of, the most important thing when you're working through bad ideas is to document them, to throw them out. And when you're working with a team, your bad idea might lead them to something that's really good. It might spur a thought from them. So I do that even when it's myself. I'm writing them down, and you can watch the names get better and better. And then at the end, I had 3 names that were bolded, and one of them was GoWild was the last name I put on the list. And I'd probably moved it, or probably kept going down for a few days, but it took me about 2 weeks to come up with the name. And, once I had that, I felt like I had something I was working towards.
Right.
For me, that part of it was really important. What's funny about that, guys, I was a creative director. My whole job was giving feedback and, talking to designers and always trying to make it better, make the logos better, make the copy better. And my co-founder, Donovan, at first he was just contracting with me and doing some like really cheap paid design work. He did the design, and he's like, "I'll give you logos later today." And I'm thinking like, "Oh, I get to be the client this time, and I get to give client feedback." He showed me the logo, and I was like, "It's perfect." That was it. V1. There was never a 1.1 or anything.
Wow.
So like, not the name came pretty quick, and then the logo was like, "Whoop, yep, that's it. Let's run with it." So.
It is serendipitous, man.
Yeah. It was funny because like by the end of September, I told you I came up with the idea in August, and by the end of September, I think I had a logo already. It was before we even had all of our co-founders.
That's pretty good stuff. Well, the beauty of what you do though, too, is studying that. I wish I would have had this app years ago. I really do, because I would always wondered, why are you just getting like a 4-power scope? And this is my friends back east, right? And I'm talking in context of the West over here, where I literally have a 5x25 on one of mine. And over there in the Appalachians, it's so dense. You really don't need more than that,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, it's funny, man. I talk to people out west, and they're like, "Why do you guys tree stand so much? Why don't you spot and stalk?" And I'm like, "Because we have leaves." It's like, I don't know what else to tell you. Like, you can't. Everything in the woods knows you're there. Like, you can't do what you guys do. You know, and like you said, you can't see anything to creep up on it. It's like you got 50 yards. That's maybe about your
Yep.
longest shot when you're hunting in the mountains. Now where I hunt, and that's my home back, it's all mountainous. It's in the, you know, one of the highest points in the Appalachians is close to where I'm from. Now here, there's a lot of farmlands. You might take a 300-yard shot, more similar to what you guys do,
Yep.
but it's still not spot and stock because it's open farmland. It's rolling hills. Like I've still, as much as I've tried, I've still yet to actually be able to spot and stock up on anything.
Yeah.
You know, it's just really tough to do. But to your point, part of what is so cool about this platform, we function. We real quick. I'll say what it is. It's a social platform with commerce built in. You can go forum based. So for you, you might look at big game or elk hunting,
Right.
and now you're connecting with people that are at least in the right mindset. But then you can hit a near me button, and it shows you all the people near you that are into that one very specific topic, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing we have is a really cool gear functionality that you can tag gear just like a person. So I can basically tag gear on my post, and then that social content is now forever bonded to that gear. So if you look up that rangefinder that you tagged, you know, if you look up a Vortex rangefinder or the Ranger in our platform, there's dozens of posts on that thing. Maybe some of these things have hundreds of posts on them. We have more reviews on some products than Cabela's or Bass Pro. We do a really good job of getting content to that product. And so now not only can you ask the right people, but you can just go straight to the gear and see what people are saying about that product, not just from like a generic 5-star or 1-star review. Because the thing with reviews, people either really love it or they really hate it. Like nobody ever goes, and it's like, it is a mediocre product. Like, no one reviews that way. It's right. They're either really pissed or they're really happy with it.
Right.
So what our product does, though, is it gives you the true story. It shows you the product in the field. You can see, you know, deer or bass taken with that product or whatever it is. So that's to me is the coolest thing we're doing. Nobody else is approaching social commerce from that angle.
Yeah, I love the fact that you just said all that, because the honest reviews from the people that truly use it, that really get down in the nitty gritty of each of the different functions. One of the things I watch Meat Eater religiously.
Yeah.
And ironically, you said Vortex. I love Vortex. Just love them. I think they're the best customer service I've ever experienced. For sure. Right. And so I have a very strong bias. Matter of fact, one of our channels is My Bias Review.
That's funny.
With that being said, though, the way that you have it, it makes it so friendly. It's you're eliminating a lot of the kind of the periphery that most people encounter when they're looking at a general product review.
And one thing that's worth noting is that it's all, I don't use this word, but it's what people, user generated content. I don't like to say users because users are for drugs, but we call them members. But it's UGC, and the brands can't decide. They don't get a say in what goes on their product. If they get a bad review, it goes. And if they like, we send out gear for reviews to like our field testers. We have a little team that maybe like 10 or 15, I think it's 15 people that test stuff. And we tell them, if you don't like it, please tell us. Like, please leave that on the review. There's no hiding anything. That's part of everything about GoWild, is that it's super organic and authentic, you know?
Yeah. I love what you just said there, because there was another guest. He was saying that, matter of fact, I just talked about this right before this program. And he said that if we're not going to be open to our vulnerabilities, someone else is going to use that to weaponize against you. And the fact of the matter is, you're creating that platform. And if the brands are willing to be that open, boy, you talk about, it's just an amazing format over here.
Yeah.
Gee whiz, man. That's fantastic.
And you know, it's funny. our reviews, as I said, are really authentic. Unlike like if you look at Amazon, my wife will go there to look at reviews, and I'm like, I mean, what are we doing here? It's the race to 4.2. Everything on Amazon is 4.2 stars. It's like 3.8 to 4.2 because the brands have hacked that system so much
Yep.
that I mean, there are literally master classes. I mean, I don't know about like an actual master class, but there are things you can find online that are basically a master class of how to hack the Amazon review system, right?
Yep.
And Amazon tries to combat this, but the Amazon scams were rampant over the
Oh
last 2
yeah.
years,
Yep.
and they're flooding the platform with fake reviews. They're
Yep.
worthless. It is the
Yep.
I mean, so with our platform, you're seeing products in the like it would take a lot of work to fake it on our platform with the way
Yep.
we've built it. I'm sure somebody will figure it out eventually, but we are pulling product content from the field. Someone killed a deer with that product, right? Like
Yep.
there's the picture of the dead deer. It's not like it's faked.
Yes.
So it's just a much better, even if there's lower volume of reviews, you're talking to people that put that stuff to work. They know that Vortex has the VIP warranty because they've sent it back after they drove over the product with a truck on accident, and they actually did get another one in the mail, like they say, right? Like you're
Yep.
getting those real life stories.
Oh yeah.
Well, what I think is
Yep.
cool about it too is it really, and we touched on this earlier, but it also um, dials it down to geographical relevance as well. So like,
Yes.
Yeah.
you know, like even like off-roading, I know this isn't what you do, but like off-roading in Arizona, rock crawling is so much different than if I'm in Kentucky.
Yeah,
Oh,
for
for
sure.
sure.
Or if I'm shooting a deer with slugs versus, long, like you said, long range out in Arizona. I mean, some of that gear is not going to be relevant to me.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
Yep.
so, and it almost seems like you've almost decentralized the review process.
You really
You
have.
know,
I like
so
that.
there's, like you said, you'd almost have to, if somebody wanted to hack your system, they'd almost have to get a group of people from all over the place,
Yeah.
convince them all to like go against, you know what I mean, do something fake. And
Yeah.
the chances of that are almost nothing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I think that's probably how things are going to evolve because, yeah, Amazon reviews are to the point they're basically worthless.
They
Oh
are,
yeah.
and I mean, literally anything you pull up is in that 3.8 to 4.2 star range.
Yeah.
And with our content, some people may say like, "Oh, that's egotistical of you to say you can't fake the reviews." Let me add on because they're not picturing what you guys have seen our pages and stuff.
Right.
We have that when you tag content, that content shows up and it gets more prominence than a review does. Really, it's got photos with it. People can see it at work. When you put that you're using that product in a setup, so if
Yeah.
I build out like my archery setup, this is my whitetail setup, or this is my bass fishing setup, that lives on the product page.
Yeah.
We're pulling in videos. There's a comment thread. Like there's a ton of content that
Yeah.
lives there besides just the review, which is what most e-commerce platforms bring in. So
Yeah.
and we're even starting to, we just recently launched, if you were to look up that Vortex Ranger, I think that's one of the products you can see this feature. We're even pulling the data because we have this trophy system.
Right.
So we know with certainty within our platform what species that product is used in pursuit of. So like that Vortex Ranger, you can see like, oh, this is most commonly used for white-tailed deer. Oh, this lure is most commonly used for bass fishing.
Yeah.
And so you're not accidentally buying the wrong, especially on the fishing side, it's really relevant. But even like you said with, when you're looking at scopes and you're a newbie, oh my God, dude,
Oh my gosh.
it's
Yes.
so
Yeah.
intimidating. And I'm not and I'll just go ahead and like, I'm a utilitarian in that I buy a thing that someone told me is going to work for what I do, and I don't like nerd out over this stuff. My co-founder Zach on the firearm side, total opposite. Zach is a long distance shooter. He like messes with his turrets so that he has to come back out every time and figure it out all over again. But Zach's a data scientist and a math nerd, and he enjoys that side of it, and I don't. Like, it's like. So, I want it to just be like, I don't want to have to go out to the range all the time, and I want to sight it in once and know that I'm good. So for someone like me, which again, a lot of the platform is built out of my realization of like, my God, I just want somebody to tell me like how to do this. That's what the platform has answered very well, which like Gary said, when when you're trying to find a group and connect with somebody, like the best thing, that's what you want, is to get into your area around the top, because I do it different here in Kentucky than Texas. And I want to talk about it with people that are pursuing the exact thing I'm doing.
Yep. And the other thing about your platform is that, again, I'm a Vortex loyalist all the way through, right?
Me too,
but
man.
I have friends that are loophole loyalists as well, or Burris loyal, and I like Burris as well. But your platform allows it to take away that crazy bias and just see it holistically for what it really is. And so you're not getting all the fanboy stuff like Maurice is going to go, you need to go get the Vortex Viper, man, all day long. And someone else is saying, no, you got to get the Burris full field too, whatever. It's just, you can make your own decision without getting into the weeds. And that's what I love about that application. It's a new way of doing things, no doubt.
Well, and GoWild doesn't lean on followers as much. We have a scoring system. So like the people that are getting the biggest bucks or the biggest bass or whatever it is, they're the ones you want to listen to, because we all know, I mean, just because you're an influencer and if you're listening along, I just air quoted hard, doesn't mean you actually should have influence, right? It could just be that you're really good at social media. Right. And so we've tried to kind of be the antithesis to that, and to create a system that really gives the people that have expertise the influence. I mean, one of the most influential people on our platform is Mike Larson, who has a butt ton of points. I have no idea how many, but like a lot. He's been on the platform. He was one of the first 500 people into the platform in 2017 when we were still in beta. And Mike is, he's probably been hunting for 40 plus years. He is an excellent hunter for goose, any kind of waterfowl, whitetail. He's a trapper. I've fished with him a bunch. Dude's super smart. I mean, and he had never been active on social media before GoWild.
Wow.
So, but on our platform, like he's actually one of our clients asked us like, hey, let's send one of your influencers on a turkey hunt. Who should we send? We're like, dude, Mike. You want to send Mike? I mean, he's literally going on a free hunt as an influencer for us, you know? So like, that's been one of the coolest things, is to see guys that have the expertise be able to rise. The cream rises to the top in our platform.
Oh, yeah.
Well, your reviews are tied to actual success, which I think a lot of platforms are not able to do.
No.
You know, and you know, even going into the, you know, traditionally you go into a forum and you would look, and you got what I consider, you know, thousands and thousands of armchair quarterbacks who are just trying to get clout. That you have no idea if it's some, you know, nose picking kid in his garage, still living in his mom's, you know, but with your platform, you can literally see the success of these people. And then it's almost like the influence is almost second tier. You know, which I think is incredibly powerful.
And one of the coolest things about it, like when I was looking for turkey calls last year, you can go to somebody's profile and see what they're using. So I was like, what turkey calls is Mike using? Like literally, I was just like, I went to his profile and it lists out the gear they use. If they have setups like a turkey hunting setup, you can see right there what they're using. You can't do that anywhere else.
You cannot.
Now you might go to an influencer's profile and they're like, Vortex, you know, all the brands that they're sponsored by, but now they're sponsored, and it's like, well, of course you said that that's the best. Like, you're paid by them, right? So, you know, there's this weird world, especially in the hunting side, but in influencers in general are just like, we haven't figured out what to do with them. You know what I mean? Like,
I know what you're talking about.
It's like we like their content, we think they're funny. They're obviously very influential, but a lot of people also. I mean, like I see this a lot in the hunting and fishing side, especially. You're like, well, of course you said to buy that. They pay you $100,000 a year, you know, and it's that kind of money. I mean, they would rather die than another brand to work with. So,
it's funny. I was skiing in Deer Valley, Utah, a couple years back, and I was getting gear. Because I wanted to rent down there, and I was talking to this kid in the ski shop, and he was saying that they come to they're dressed in the latest and greatest Gore-Tex and all these $1,000 up in these ski suits, and they have these ski sets that are for Olympians and are ready to go. And I'm putting past them in my starter jacket and my 25-year-old skis.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
but
dude,
but yet they're getting views because they're wearing this stuff completely non-functional. And so this is, again, I use that word again, refreshing.
yeah.
And you know what's interesting is this happens on both ends of the spectrum. Let me explain that. Is this bias? We all have a bias, and this kind of ties into like my bias review that we're working on right now. Is so on the expert side or the influencer side, you've got bias because I'm getting paid a gazillion dollars, and then on the beginner stage, you have bias because that's the only thing I've ever tried. You know what I mean? Whatever I have in my arsenal,
Yeah.
that's all I know. So I'm going to be like, yeah, this is the greatest thing, but they don't have the breadth of knowledge that, you know what I mean? So it's kind of a weird scenario that the industries are in right now, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and two, it kind of depends on the different types of gear. Like fishing is one where people kind of be loyal, but like you're always evolving your gear because it's cheap,
Mhm.
right? And you lose a lot of
Yes.
it.
Yeah. It's the nature of the game.
Yeah, hunting though, like I've seen I've watched a lot of people that they want to get into a brand. We'll just use First Light because you brought up Meat Eater.
Yep.
You know, Steve Ranella wears First Light, so I want to wear First Light, right?
Yeah.
So now I go buy my First Light coat, and you're like, man, now I gotta buy First Light pants. Well, those are the puffy pants. Now I gotta get the guide pants. Like it's like a freaking drug, dude. You get going in. You get going into this stuff and like there's no coming back, you know. And so it's a little interesting because I do see hunting as like people kind of do commit to that brand like you're saying and they
Yes.
stick with it. And then I watch the fishermen and like they would try literally anything if it meant that they could catch a bigger fish. Like some of the
Yes.
crazy stuff that people load that they're fishing with on GoWild is just amazing to me. Like there's less, I don't want to say there's no brand loyalty in fishing because there certainly is when it comes to the bigger ticket items. But
Right.
you also see a lot of like all over the place on the lower price lures and stuff. I say lower price. Some of these things are still like $15, $20, but it is funny. Like it's kind of like it's a very, I think Gary kind of said this when he started, it's on both ends, right? Like
Yes.
there's like no loyalty at all, but then there's like, no, I'm First Light forever and always. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's kind of the, oh, sorry, go ahead, Maurice.
No. I was just saying, well, you brought up Meat Eater again, and I love the daggum show. But one of the funniest things I've ever seen is when Steve's down there in the Amazon, and he has his felt bottom shoes, and he has his Hoyt bow and arrow, and he has all these awesome rods. And there's this dude, literally, he's going like this, and it's around a piece of wood, and he's catching them. Boom, boom.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
So
dude.
it's functional bias. If I'm watching that, I want the dude with the hand thrown thing.
Yeah, and I think that same episode you're talking about, that guy pulls out that bow that is homemade and it's made with like a vine, and the arrow's flying like 50 feet a second versus like 300 feet a second. You know, like it doesn't even look like it would knock over a domino, and that's what they hunt with. You know.
Yeah, you know exactly what the episode I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But it sounds like your platform in a way kind of leans into that bias. If anything, it kind of minimizes the impact of these different types of bias, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I mean,
have you guys thought to expand into other areas? I mean, this kind of model sounds incredibly powerful.
Very perceptive question. We might eventually. I mean, for today, we're very focused on the outdoors. That's our passion.
Right.
There are opportunities we're interested in because I think our again, nobody's doing what we're doing, and I think we've kind of proved our expertise in being able to do social commerce better and differently than everybody else. We haven't done it at the scale of like an Instagram. I'm not really interested in that. Like I would rather have I could see us 5 years down the road running a golf version of this. And
for sure,
golf is very similar. A lot of the brands that are in golf are brands we already work with. Gotcha. A lot of them, the rangefinders, the Garmins of the world, the Bushnells, a lot of those brands make golf products. That'd be a natural transition. So it's on our radar. I don't know that we will or won't. It's not something we're actively working on, but yeah, I mean, I would argue that there's a real opportunity to take what we've done and reapply it and have smaller audiences of a few
Yeah.
million people in multiple verticals than trying to build GoWild to capture 90% of hunters. Like that
100%.
doesn't make sense to us.
Yeah.
Especially there's certain, like the older our demographic gets, the less likely they are to be super tech savvy. We've seen that, and then just recently we had a slew of kids find out about the app, and it's been freaking bananas. You read the startup books when they're like hacking away trying to keep the servers alive. We've kind of had some of that recently, of just different varying level because of the rewards. The kids love the rewards.
Yeah.
You can get free stickers and get free shirts, and then they found out you could get gift cards, and it was like all of a sudden like entire cities are lighting up, which was kind of fun. But these kids, they don't complain about the app being hard to learn at all. Like they get it. They're motoring through it, and they are just obsessed, and they're asking like to come work for us and stuff. Whereas like you get that 65 and up range, which is still a pretty popular, like it's probably a third of hunters are in that 55 to 70 range.
Yep.
And they complain about it. It's like it's unfamiliar to them. And I will tell you now, we did not go out and replicate Facebook for the outdoors. Like it's very different. We have if you've had our app, you realize like, okay, yeah, there's a navigation menu at the bottom, but like what the hell's a home screen, right? Like nobody else does that. We have it's a dashboard of all your stuff. And so there's definitely some different concepts in there that are foreign to people that make it a little tougher with this audience, but I think it would scale well into other audiences.
Right. Oh man. And you're creating a culture over there that is very unique. You own up to everything. One of the funniest things I've ever seen on your Facebook is fairly recently. Someone asked, well, this is like a Facebook for rednecks. And someone said, "Daggum right we are, and we got a trailer in the front to prove it."
Yeah, I think Chris posted about that on LinkedIn recently.
Yeah, it was so funny, and just the response from that, it was honest. It wasn't hiding anything of who you are, and I loved it because you could tell that there's such a strong culture that you have built there that people really know that they can expand and grow. And that does get me into another question. You also said something, and this was on LinkedIn, is make your team members unhirable. You got to go into that because that is brilliant, man. Absolutely brilliant.
I told you guys about me getting fired. So I've been through my share of bad cultures. Right. I told you I was already trying to find a way out of that job. And my second company was really good. There were parts of like my direct boss there was awesome. I had some people I didn't get along with as well. So like I had a great culture on my team and my direct superior, but there were other teams that I felt like had bad culture. So I've been through like 7 years of working in companies before starting our own company that I felt like taught me a lot. You can learn a lot by watching what other people do to you, right? Like, so being unhirable is something that my team brought to my attention. I didn't come up with that. We up until recently had never lost anybody, and we'd fired people. That's different. But having people willingly leave was hurtful. We had the first guy leave us recently, and it was around then, or maybe before, around that time that Mike decided to go, and which he had a great opportunity for him. We wished him well. But one of our other team members, Braden, said, you've basically made me unhirable because I can't go to work for anybody else where I don't have the same level of autonomy, where I can't, be myself. And I think a lot of people realize we give you a very long leash here, basically no leash, right? Like you're like the dog with maybe the shock collar. Like you can go way, way over there. And we're not going to say anything until it's like, whoa, that was definitely too far. Like there's no warning. It's not so like they love that though. And it creates a very sink or swim environment, which is why we have fired a decent amount of people for how
Right.
short our company tenure is, because we don't handhold. I put it in our applications that we will not handhold. If you are not a self-starter, this is not for you.
Yeah.
And so what that does is it over time, we have really created a place where players want to be, because
Yep.
they are allowed to run. They don't have to deal with bureaucracy and red tape that can
Yeah.
form. I mean, I've been in companies as small as like 30 or 40 people where there's red tape, and you have to go through like meeting after meeting after meeting to get something approved, and it goes to the client, and then it's got to come back through accounts, and then accounts has to meet with creative, and creative has to meet with traffic. It's like, oh my God, all we want to do is change the headline of this page. You know, it's like, why are we doing all this stuff? Whereas here, like, people are more apt to just do it and tell you about it later. And, you know, they're in meetings where we have four co-founders at our company, by the way.
Oh man.
And they'll be in a meeting with all of us, and they'll tell us we're wrong, and they can do that without fear of retribution. They know that I'm probably going to be more mad on if they don't say something, or I should say
Yeah.
mad. I'm not going to be mad if anybody ever tells. And in fact, I literally, my team tells me I'm wrong all the time, and I usually am. Now I'll go, if I feel I'm right, I'll go toe to toe with you. But if I'm like, oh, you're the expert in that, let's do what you say. Like, we have this very flat culture, and it's just very different, man. I mean, I don't know anybody here that would tell you they've worked at a place like this. Like, that's
Oh,
what
yeah.
we've done better than anything, is creating a culture that has gives you a lot of autonomy, a lot of room to run. But that also, it means you got a lot of room to screw it up. I mean,
Yeah.
one of my team members one time joined the marketing team, and you know, I mean, I gave him, he started running with things, and, you know, had a $12,000 mistake on a marketing spend, and he's thinking he's going to get fired. And I'm like, no, you know, it's fine. We learn and grow from this stuff. And now, I don't think he would care. I want to say Braden has turned into this rock star. I hope he doesn't mind that I just told people that he made a $12,000 mistake. You know, it was his early days, and now he's managing the biggest budget I've ever worked on in my career from a marketing standpoint. And people, I think, like, people approach us and they ask me like, hey, can I approach you guys for sponsorship? And I hand them over to the marketing specialist, and they're like, oh, well, I want to talk to you. And I'm like, I don't have anything to do with that decision. That's not mine. Like, Braden is your guy to make that, if you want that done. Likewise, when brands want into our platform, they're like, I want to sell through you guys. I want to set a meeting up with you. I'm like, I don't run that. That's Jacob. Jacob makes those decisions. Now, Jacob will ask me what I think, but we just give people a ton of leeway. And you know, they love, we had a developer show up the other day, first day in flip-flops. Like, I don't care. I mean, I'll probably wear flip-flops here in a few months, you know. It's like, we all are just ourselves. And I think it works really well, man. There's no stuffiness. There's a scale where you get to a certain size in the company, and this gets tougher because you get a lot of personalities. But even then, I think you just have to build people up to have a little bit thicker skins to be able to, at the very least, everybody should be able to tell anybody they're wrong.
Yeah.
Like, that's the bottom shelf expectation, and that is what makes some people unhirable. Because my team, if they joined another team right now and walked in with some of this attitude of like, this is a really jacked up way to do this, why are we doing this way, like, they would be shown the door, right? It's like, oh, you don't fit in here because you speak up too much, you know. But I didn't come up with this. It always gets attributed to Steve Jobs, but like, I don't go hire A+ talent and then tell them what to do. Like, that would be really stupid, right? So that's what the Unhirable comes down to.
I hope you trademark that, man, because that's a cool phrase.
Thanks, man. I've leaned into it since they've told me about it. Yeah, I think it's a cool concept as well.
Oh yeah, and it just speaks volumes for the individual you are as a leader, and where your company is going. If they feel that buy-in, that's a gigantic deal. So this isn't
it's the
just
best retention you can do. It's the best retention. I mean, like, literally, they all love some aspect of the outdoors, but I think we could have built this culture around cooking, or, you know, I mean, like, we could have done it around, makeup. It's like, does it even really matter what they get to do if they get really excited about the conversion elements of it. Like, I think it's not just the content that makes them excited. It's the
Yeah.
fact that we're doing something that's never been done. And it's the fact that they get to see the real time impact of it, of like, oh, I made that tweak and we got 12% more sales or whatever it is, you know? No, it doesn't hurt that they're all outdoor obsessed and they can like not show up for work tomorrow to fish and I won't say anything, right? Like they can build their day around whatever they want to do. Jacob is notorious for that. He's like, I'm going fishing this morning. I'll catch up on work later. You know, there is that element of it too. But you
Right.
know, you can give people that kind of leeway no matter what your company does.
Yeah. No doubt about it.
The Patagonia, his book, Let My People Go Surfing, right? It's like, if the waves are good this morning, I'm not going to tell people they have to come in and go to that meeting. They should go surf. You only
That
get so many,
is awesome.
you only get so many waves, you know?
What was it? Like, what's that shoe company? Zappos, whatever it was.
Yeah.
One of their
Tony Shea.
things is like stay weird or be weird, or you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yep.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yep. Tony
and it's
Shea's
such a
book, Delivering Happiness, is one of
Yeah.
the best business books I've ever read.
It really is.
And I read that tragically like 3 months after he died. But you know, what a loss. But that is a phenomenal book on this kind of culture. When you're trying to wrap your head around it. The other one I always tell people is Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull.
Oh yes.
Founder of Pixar. It's probably my favorite.
Fantastic. Ed Catmull.
Yep. Probably my favorite business book. One of my favorite books, period. He talks through the founding of Pixar with Steve Jobs and John Lasseter, and I've straight up ripped off a lot of his processes to build a team like this. I mean, I started executing that when I was a creative director in the agency side, and have added to it now to work for me. But I mean, foundationally, a lot of what I do comes straight from that book.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, great books, no doubt about it. Great books. You fall in line with a number of other books I've been reading lately. So
I mostly, I mean, I read a lot, and I steal a lot of other people's good ideas and kind of mesh it into my own management. My team probably gets sick of me telling them to read this or that, but you know, I haven't done a lot of this stuff before, and as you're trying to scale and learn how it's done, you know, why not turn to people who have done it?
that is.
well, then it's interesting to see how kind of the corporate mentality is changing and evolving over time.
Yep.
Because, you know, it should seem pretty obvious that it makes no sense that you're going to just micromanage someone from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5.
Yep.
And they're going to be sitting at their cubicle for the last 15 minutes staring at that stupid clock. You know, maybe my style is that I just do a whole bunch really fast and efficient, and I'm done in 3 hours.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's crazy that it's like 2022 and we're just barely starting to figure some of this stuff out.
Yeah,
you know?
it's I had worked my agency when I was at the second agency was really remote friendly, and so I had always worked one day a week remote. They had a policy where you could do one day, which at the time seemed really lenient. Now it seems really strict. But I had changed diapers on conference calls and stuff, and I just had gotten really used to working that way. And then when the pandemic hit, I remember predicting a lot of. I don't want to sound like a savant here. I'm not saying I was, but like I knew a lot of these corporations were going to struggle with a lot of this stuff, and my biggest fear was that it was going to stress team members out, that they had to be at their computer at all times, and you know, it actually was going to mean people work more because they're waking up at the same time, but they're not commuting. And it's interesting because we have had a lot of people come in, and you know, we have a time off tracker on Slack, which is meant to, like, if you have to be gone for a couple hours, you're supposed to tell people where you're, like, hey, I don't care what you're doing, but like, hey, I'm going to be away from the computer. Like I did it before I joined you guys. I said, hey, stepping away for a minute. We'll do a podcast. It's funny though, because people will say, taking the dog for a walk, and I'm like, I don't care about your dog's bladder. Like, you don't have to report that often, right? Like, it takes a while to get used to having a team that doesn't care, that doesn't need, like, you can go eat lunch without telling us, you know, it's cool. It's not what that channel's for. So we get to kind of watch in real time of people getting used to having that no leash approach. But the other thing, to tap onto what Gary said there of like why do hours matter?
Yeah.
I mentioned like we have had to let some people go, and they were all great people. It wasn't that. It's just, you know, some startups are tough for some personality types and working types. Um, we don't tell you have to work a certain number of hours. We probably do work people more than a normal 40 hours. It's a startup, so it probably happens
Sure.
from time to time. But what is interesting, like you just get a bucket of work in a sprint and you get a chance to rebuttal it. And if you don't get it done, that's when it's a red flag. If you
Mhm.
kind of agreed to that it was doable and then you didn't do it. One
Yeah.
time is forgivable, two times is kind of a well, three times is a red flag, right? Like
Yeah.
that's kind of a unspoken thing. But what's interesting is, you know, when you give people that autonomy and you do get those A players, like it never happens. Like if stuff didn't get done, it's because probably I was a bottleneck in something else, right? Like you
Yeah.
just don't think about it as much, but it has literally nothing to do with tracking their time. You know,
Yes.
Yeah.
it's
Yes.
more if you track output and quit worrying about like, oh,
Ooh, I
you
like
left
it.
15 minutes early. Like I literally that first company, we sit there at like 4:55. Everybody's waiting. 5 o'clock hits and everybody in unison steps up and goes to the door. You know, my kids like that movie Zootopia, and I literally I think about that company every time the little hamsters come
Yeah.
walking out all in single file because that was my first company I worked for. Everybody's like running to the car at 5 o'clock.
all
You
you
know,
all you have to do is look at the traffic jams at 5 o'clock. It's the
right?
same thing going on right now, man.
Dude, our team, and what's funny about that is like I think 70% of the people that work out of this building leave at 3 o'clock to beat traffic, and like I don't know what they do when they go home. I don't check to be like, is Kyler on Slack at
Yeah.
5 o'clock? He left at
Yeah.
3. Like whatever. It's just so crazy to me that people want to manage the hours instead of the output.
I
Well,
love that.
what I think is funny
Yeah.
too is that, so, you know, with the pandemic, it kind of forced a lot of companies' hands on giving people, you know, whether you're working remotely or from home or wherever it is. But then they're also just still struggling to figure that out. I'm sure you've seen the videos where people are tying their mouse to a oscillating fan so that they can keep those, you know. I talked to
It's like
someone
your
that,
Slack light has to be on. Like, why did your
yeah,
Slack go into snooze?
yeah, I was talking to someone that does kind of remote case management for a hospital or whatever, and it's almost absurd at how, you know, they're like, okay, you can work remote, but it's almost a tighter leash than you were if you were even in an
Right.
office. I
They're
mean,
like,
it's
well,
great.
you have to install this software where we can see all of your screen. It's like,
Yeah.
whoa, I'm out. Like, there's
Forget
I
that,
Yeah,
man.
quit.
yeah,
I would
Forget
yeah.
about
quit,
it.
dude. Like, I couldn't
Like,
do it.
yeah, fine. Give me my office back. Like, forget this. You know,
Yeah.
it's
That's the thing that's interesting is if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, my job makes me do that. Like, well, now, you know, before you couldn't live remotely, you know, it
Yes.
wouldn't have been possible many years ago because of the internet. The internet
Yeah.
now, the speeds, even back where I'm from, where there still might not even be cell service, the internet's fine. You know, you get good
Yeah.
speeds on it. It's possible to work anywhere. And Mike, I know a guy here locally that just started at Twitter, you know, out of Louisville. You know, that Twitter's remote. It doesn't matter. That's like the running joke now is like, why doesn't Twitter turn its HQ into a homeless shelter, right? Since no
seriously.
one's using it, right? But you know, it just is become irrelevant. Now there are skills that just don't apply to the computer world. They're probably not the type that listen to this podcast though, right? Like we're not
Sure.
talking about blue collar jobs of bricklayers and you know, it's not an option for everybody, but they have a whole different set of problems that we don't understand, and we have a set of problems that they don't understand. And I'm talking to the person that is a copywriter or is in marketing or whatever it is, CPAs. It's like all of it's like my CPA lives in St. Louis 4 hours from here. Like it's irrelevant, right? Like it doesn't. This whole concept of being together as a necessity is weird. Now I will add on to that and say there's also this weird this weird flip where people are hating on offices, and I'm like, well, hang on now. Like there's value to having the team
Absolutely.
together too. We can't act like being human is bad now either. I understand like there's a lot of benefits to it, and I'm super pro remote. I had after the pandemic, I had team members locally that just never came back. They stayed remote, right? Like it was fine, because that's what they preferred. But I do like we after a certain point, and I think it was like last late summer, we decided like, hey, one day a week we'd like to see you guys because we like you, and culturally it's really important if we can to have these moments.
Yeah.
And I just did a review with an employee yesterday who's remote, and she said, I don't feel because I'm a remote employee that I miss out on anything because we do a good job of keeping everybody together. But I think she also knows that like the team that's here, I still have more moments with them of like passing by jokes. Right
Yeah.
now, I've got 3 guys sitting out here in the warehouse while 2 others are working in the warehouse. They're out there listening to God knows what, smoking cigars together. I had to like tell one of them, like, dude, you're stinking up the t-shirts. You got to move. Like, can you move it 10 yards down the? But they're having fun together, and that's what it's all about. Like, you can't do that remotely. So, like,
Yeah.
I also don't like the whole. There's been this weird swing of like anti-office, and I'm like, well,
Mhm.
offices aren't evil. They can be fun.
Yeah.
I remember back in the day when I was self-employed for well over a decade, and there was a time where I needed an office. I needed a way to separate my home life
Yeah.
from work.
Yes.
Otherwise, I was just going 24/7.
Most of my team that works out of this office,
Mhm.
they were the first ones to come back even before we really had even like we had a day which was the day everybody went home, right? Like mid-March 2020.
Right.
But by May or June, they're like, dude, I got to get out of my house.
Yeah.
They needed that separation. And even now with gas prices, I've got team members that drive 30 minutes to the office at least a couple times a week to get away from their kids. It's like they want that
Sure.
space. So
But
important.
I think that's where you're having some success though, is you have a
The
model to
autonomy.
fit everyone's individual needs,
Yeah.
whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Like there's a place for you. But one of the things that you said that I think is just incredible is that people are willing to make mistakes, even some fairly big ones.
Yeah.
And you look at those as learning, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Aside from, I always tell, teams that I've worked with is straight up, unless you're just straight up being belligerent and doing something, negligent is a whole nother issue.
Yeah, negligence is different than risk.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah,
that's where the magic happens. That's where you learn stuff. That's where
I straight up ripped that entire philosophy off of Ed Catmull because they do the brain trust and they're very big on pushing people to be bold. And I've since I made perfect sense when I was a creative director. I'm like, oh, we want to be bold creatively, right? But here, we're a startup. We have to do this 10x better than anybody else that's doing it. So we have to be risky. Like that, the whole endeavor is risky. So if we're trying to play it safe, we're as good as dead.
Yeah.
So it's very much, in fact, like day 1 or 2, everybody gets a hour-long presentation of our culture, and it hammers home risk is good. Risk is how we get reward. We're not here to play it safe. You're not going to get in trouble for failing. Failure is accepted and encouraged,
Yeah.
because really through failing is how we figure out how to do something that's new.
Yeah.
I think the Ed
you've
Catmull
dropped.
quote is the Ed Catmull quote, real quick to button that up, is
Yeah.
if we always stick to the expected, we'll let's see, what is it? If we always stick to the expected, we'll never discover something new or the future. I can't remember, but like the idea of like if we're always doing what we've always done,
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
can't
there's no
invent.
So you're obviously someone that does a lot of you read a lot. You had some stuff that have really had some impact on your trajectory in business. Give us kind of like a handful of either books that you've read or people that you've talked to, whatever, that have had the most impact on. I mean, you've already named like 2 or 3, but if you could just repeat them so we have them in a.
Well, no, I can. I mean, even just in the last couple of years, things I've read. I mentioned Ed Catmull's book. That's a must read. 0 to 1. If you're building a product, Peter Thiel's book 0 to 1 is really good. I know it's in a lot of startup stories. But I've like, that was a really, really good book for us in understanding that 10X concept. Like, you have like people call us Facebook for the outdoors sometimes, and I'm like, that's fine if that helps you wrap your head around it. But if I had built Facebook for the outdoors, we would have failed already.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
From a build side, the book Hooked is really good. It's from a product side. And I hate telling people about this book because the title is so gross, but it's called How to Build Addictive Products. And I hate the concept of addictive products. We actually don't want to do that. We don't measure, time on app like most people. When we know what it is, but like, it's not a stat we try to increase. But like, that book for a user experience person is really, or a marketer really, is really powerful. It teaches you how to think about keeping your product top of mind through the product, not marketing, right? And that's a big difference. So if you're building a product, I really recommend checking that one out. Jonah Berger has, I've read his book Contagious twice.
Ooh,
and it is really good. And he talks about how to take something and make it incredibly unique to where people talk about it, right? The idea of being contagious, which, funny enough, I read that book again in March of 2020 when the virus was hitting us full speed. I was literally packing up my desk to go home, and I found that like book sitting there. I'm like, well, this is serendipity, and I picked it up and like, I'm gonna go read this again. If you're new to marketing, Purple Cow is a really good one, just to like wrap your head around transforming your brand.
Yeah.
We talked about Zappos being a good one. I want two of my favorite books from just business stories that I think neither one get enough love for what they are, but That Will Never Work by Mark Randolph. It's the story of Netflix, and I love that book because it hangs so much in the pain of starting a company.
Yeah.
And it's not like, and then we were worth $1 billion. Like so many of these startup books, like they're like, yeah, we started in a basement. And then chapter 2, it's like, and then Andreessen Horowitz gave us $15 million. And I'm like, thank you for being totally irrelevant to like 99% of us, right? Like I'll never be able to do that. And so I really like books that labor on like, man, we were almost dead 12 times in the first 6 months. And That Will Never Work is one of those. In fact, they had a whole other business idea that did fail, or well, I can't remember what it was. I read that book last year and it was phenomenal. I did an audio book and I loved it so much I went out and bought the print book too. And the other one I did that with was Phil Knight's book, Shoe Dog, which I thought would be irrelevant to me.
Right.
But we were building this e-commerce platform to where we're dealing with trying to figure out how to own inventory or drop ship and all this stuff. And I mean, that book, most of the book is Nike almost dying over and over and over again, like to the point of like they had an hour left where they were going to be out of money and couldn't pay their bills and have to shut the company down. And then a check gets there. Like the number of times that happened. And I thought it was very, it's incredible what he did with that book to show how vulnerable. It took a lot of vulnerability to show that and to be that transparent about how close they were to failure. Anything by Jim Collins, literally anything. I mean, like Good to Great is a good one to start with. But I learned a lot from that. That's probably my like entrepreneurial go bag.
That's awesome. Thank you.
You gotta add Principles by Ray Dalio and Essentialism by Greg McEwen in that
dude, I'm gonna have to go back and try Principles again. I started that book and I have this rule that if like I just did not like it in the first I probably got 10% into it and I was like, this is not for me. But this is the second time this week somebody's told me to go read it.
Audiobook it.
Yeah, well, I was audiobooking it, and I churn audiobooks. If I don't like them, I shut them off. Because I've gotten to a point where I've gotten to multiple books where at the end I'm like, my God, that's 30 hours of my life I'll never get back. Or 15 hours. And so I just like, if it sucks, I just churn it fast. And I did not like that book, but you're another, like, this is literally twice this week that somebody's told me that it was one of their favorites. You just reminded me of The Hard Thing About Hard Things. I just made fun of Andreessen Horowitz, but that's by Ben Horowitz, and it is an awesome book. I mean, that one's also super transparent on all the times they were screwed. I read that one in 2020 and really, really enjoyed it. I think most entrepreneurs should read that. So many people think, because this is what we see is the news websites saying GoWild raised $2.5 million, and I'll literally get a flood of people emailing me thinking that like I'm gonna go buy tailored suits now or something, and I'm like, still poor. Like I'm first time founder over here trying to make it happen. And there's a lot of strife and adversity and anxiety that is happening on the other side of that news article that people don't know about. And I think reading books like The Hard Thing About Hard Things, and Phil Knight's book and That Will Never Work, is you realize how many times you're going to brush with death. And we've had it happen here multiple times. I mean, Q2 2020 was the scariest 3 months of my life. I thought we were like, thank God we had just coincidentally raised some money and we're in the middle of a funding round instead of starting one. Because if we had been starting, I wouldn't be talking to you guys here today unless you wanted to talk about my landscaping company I just started or something. Like, who knows what I would have done. I don't know. Like it would have been a much different story because everybody stopped like investing. I watched it because I was raising when COVID hit, and I saw everything seismic shift, man. Like everything changed, and we got lucky and found some good investors and finished strong in 2020. But whew, it was hard times, dude.
No, well, and you came out on top. And you came out on top in the right way, and in the way that you're still progressing, and that's what I love. You found something that you've had a passion about. You've made it actionable, and the fact is, you created a culture that is conducive to continual growth. I love seeing this, man.
I appreciate it. And COVID ended up being really good for us because it killed our first business. Well, actually, it's kind of our first business model. We're on our third pivot, but we hadn't pivoted the business model. We thought at first we were going to be an activity tracker like Strava for the outdoors. We had all these Garmin devices and we were working with, and our audience didn't really bite on that. But the gear stuff we were doing was really taking hold, and we thought that we would be able to use, if we knew that you liked this brand because of the gear that you were tagging, we could show you ads. We always knew we needed more revenue streams, but we're like, we'll figure it out. We'll get there. We knew we were going to be receptive to a recession if one ever hit, because when a recession hits, first thing that goes advertising. Well, recession hit all right, and by the end of March, we had lost every ag contract we had built up through trade show season. We were dead in the water. We made almost no money in Q2 of 2020. I mean that too, like almost none. And so after 90 days, brands at first were like, oh, we'll be back by summer with our budget. This is just, everybody, I remember everybody's like, go home for 2 weeks, everybody thought this was going to be over real fast. What was not foreseen was what this was going to do to the supply chain. I lived that real time of companies coming back and be like, so we have no product until 2021. And so we can't advertise with you guys. So, at that point we're like, well, we got to figure out something else. So go to the drawing board. We're like, well, we got all this gear data. Why don't we look and see what brands people like on GoWild, and let's see if we can sell those products. And so we did that and relaunched a business model that ended up like, now I look at it and I'm like, my God, how did we not figure that out sooner? Like it seems so obvious now, but when you're in the moment and things are going well, which they were in 2020, it's kind of hard to see the world in any other color than rosy when you got rose-colored glasses on.
Totally.
But then you get punched in the face and your glasses get broken, and you're like, dude, what just happened? I'm blinded.
you brought up that word pivot. I mean, you pivoted and you
hard.
Grabbed it, right?
Yeah. Advertising was 95% of our revenue projections, maybe 90 to 95% of 2020's revenue projections. This year it's 20%.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's a full-blown pivot. I didn't even realize it was a pivot until we were through it. At that time, I just thought, oh, we're finally getting that other revenue stream, because I just kept thinking advertising would come back, but now I've taken notes since the beginning. I've got about 150 pages of notes on the whole experience. in case I ever write a
Book.
book or
I
something.
feel a book coming, man.
Yeah, I mean, I there's been so much weird stuff, man. I told you guys we wouldn't do a 20-minute show. We're at like 6 minutes.
No, I'm digging.
But
This is great.
I could do hours of just weird stuff that's happened. But it's fun to look back now because I'm like, I'm reading I can go back and look and be like, I'm documenting like, what the hell's a PPP? And you know, you're trying to figure out like I remember just sitting out on my deck, like looking at spreadsheets, trying to figure out how to like apply for these loans and stuff. There's been a lot of really bizarre stuff that's happened along the way.
You've got to write a book. I can see it happening.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun stories that I haven't ever told on podcast either that or anywhere that I'm like, I might just save that one for the book if it ever happens.
It'll happen. It'll happen the way you do it. And plus you got to put that journalism degree to use, man.
Yeah, I know, man. I do love to write. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see one day. I might do it. I tell you what, the reason I really would love to do it is because I get so many people who ask me, how did you get off the ground? Where do you start? And you know, I used to try to meet with all these people and it gets overwhelming. And I don't mean like that kind of sounds obnoxious to say, but like you just can't meet with every random person off of the LinkedIn that wants to have a coffee with you. But I would love to have a resource to be able to tell people like, hey, I've already documented how I did it and here it is. Because I do think like I just read the Uber book, and while incredibly entertaining, it is totally irrelevant, right? Like I will never raise multiple billions of dollars to build a company that's going to scale into every country in the world. I'm not going to fight like the mafia to get my company ingrained into culture like they did.
That's right.
You know, like Theranos, Bad Blood is a phenomenal book. Everybody should read it, but it's completely irrelevant to most of us. We're not going to have 5-star generals on our board, right? So I think like the problem is book deals come from people that do build unicorns. Or have like massive social media followings. That's like basically how these things happen these days. But I don't know. I if nothing else, like I really respected the way, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Casey Graham, would also be a good guest on your show. He's the founder and CEO of Gravy, but he just released a book and he self-published it because even as popular as he is on LinkedIn, everybody told him like, oh, you're not big enough for us. But I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'll go it alone one day and just do it so that I have it. So when these people ask me for like advice on how I did all this stuff, I'm like, well, it started with a Google search and here is the story from there. Right.
I love it. Well, then you'll come back on the podcast and go, here it is, man.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
No, I know you've given us a ton of time and I can't thank you enough for it. There's so many things that we could talk about from a business perspective, from a passion perspective in the outdoors. And I'm looking forward to being able to stay in touch and revisiting this, if that's cool.
Happy to come back sometime and catch up and we can get in the weeds on something. We kind of talked high level today on culture and some leadership stuff, but I'm sure we could have a chat and do this again. You know, we could go for another hour on something really specific of like how to start a company. I mean, I love those kind of things.
100%. And then you got to come hunting with us out here in Oregon, man.
Yeah, dude, I would love to. It's on the to-do list. I get so many invites. And again, I say stuff like this sometimes and it sounds obnoxious. I don't mean it that way. But like, you get a lot of people on GoWild that are really nice and they're like, hey, you should come hunt with me sometime. And I right now I'm looking at my own turkey season here in Kentucky and I'm like, I don't even know if I'm going to get 4 days. Like it's, you know, that's the life. I always tell people, they're like, I want to get in the outdoors industry with my own company. And I'm like, don't do it. That's the surest way to never get to be in the outdoors again.
It's true, you know?
It's like I've done some really cool stuff like fish in Alaska and hunt 15 miles from the Texas border, but usually it's not that glamorous. Like I'll get 3 hours to go sit in a deer stand and I'm still checking emails while I'm there. You know?
Oh man, that's harsh.
Yeah, it's rough. There's some years I've done better than others. It just kind of depends. But this turkey season isn't looking too good.
Well,
I'm going tomorrow. I'm going tomorrow with my dad, so I'm pumped.
You got to do it, man.
We need to do that podcast so that you can point to that until you get your book out. Like I would
There we
love to
go.
get in the weeds a little bit on getting started and that type of
Yeah,
stuff.
dude, I'd love it. Well, there we go. We'll come back here soon, and we'll talk on like, okay, you got an idea. What do you do next?
Deal. Let's do it.
Our
Let's
own
do it.
mastermind group, man.
Sounds great.
Well, thanks for your time, Brad.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it.
Yeah.